Before you start thinking about breaking into banking, you should highly consider, do I really want to do banking? Investment banking, as I expressed in my other videos, is definitely not a job that you should take lightly just because some guy on YouTube told you you could make 6 figures right after college. Before you think about investing in a career in investment banking, clever. You should highly consider a number of different things. Are you willing to put in 80, 90 hours a week? Are you okay with being on call 24/7? How important is money to you? Does raising capital on behalf of your clients sound exciting? Are you okay with wearing business casual? These are just some of the questions you should definitely consider before investing any time in the recruitment process. Once you've decided to take on this path of, I'm going to do investment banking, next you should consider, what kind of investment banking do I want to do? Investment banking is a big umbrella. It covers everything and anything that has to do with raising capital on behalf of a corporation, a government, or even an individual. M&A, corporate finance, equity research, sales and trading, asset management. I'm not going to go through every single one of these in detail in this video. There are thousands of articles out there that will do a far better job explaining. You should also consider what kind of bank. There are the bulge bracket banks, the banks that even non-finance people have heard of. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley. There's also middle market banks, regional boutiques, or elite boutiques. You should also do your research on, does this bank cover the type of investment banking that I want to do? What kind of culture does this bank have? What kind of industries are covered at this bank? All these questions are very important in your recruitment process and the targeted approach you should take when approaching investment banking. Next, this might not be as important, but location should also matter. Wall Street is located in New York City. Most, if not all, the banks are in New York City or have a branch in New York City, but perhaps you want to go to Chicago like me, you want to be in Boston, in LA, in San Francisco, or Europe, Asia, Canada. You should also consider, is my school a target school or a non-target school? What I mean by that is most banks hire specifically from certain schools, whether that be because founders of the firm may have come from that school, or your school is just great, you go to an Ivy League. So you should really consider, is my school a target school? Or do I belong to a non-target school and I have to do a bit of extra work because there are no guaranteed spots at this bank specifically for people of my school? The distinction between target and non-target is relatively important. And in the most blunt way possible, you should take a relatively realistic approach. If investment banking is your goal, I think it's still very possible to break into investment banking as a non-target candidate. It's just whether or not you're okay with putting in the extra mile of work, because frankly, a lot of these banks have spots guaranteed for people coming from a specific school. All the non-targets get placed into a singular pool, and you're gonna have to compete with other non-target students. What is networking? In banking, networking is essential. Networking in the most broad sense is having conversations with people already in the field to learn more about the job, more about the firm that they work for, gaining secondhand exposure directly to the experiences of that bank through the individual you're connecting with. Once you break into one individual at a firm, you can leverage that individual to gain more exposure to the firm by asking for recommendations on who else should I talk to. And that banker will most likely, not always, introduce you to the next level or someone the equal level. So if you're talking to an analyst, the analyst might say, hey, you should talk to associate A, or you should talk to vice president B. And as you keep going up the ladder, you'll gain not only more exposure to the firm, but pick up on nuances of what makes this bank different. What is investment banking? Do I really want to work at this firm? Do people at this firm seem to enjoy what they're doing? And all these things are obtainable not only through networking, but primarily through networking. As someone on the inside of an investment bank, I wouldn't necessarily say that they have this master checklist of saying, oh, Johnny did networking, +1, Sally didn't do networking, -1. But you have to realize banking at the end of the day is a people's business, like most businesses are. And who you become friendly with, who you've had exposure to, they're gonna stand out. And when HR goes through resumes, they're gonna reach out to bankers and say, hey, what do you think of B? And if someone says, hey, I've had a conversation with B and he was great. Or, hey, what do you think about C? And a banker might say, I've actually never even heard of C. That person might have the best resume, the best GPA, but if there's someone else with maybe slightly less good of a resume, but they've had multiple conversations, clearly show their passion, they're gonna stand out. Networking in the beginning might seem tedious, but it really shows who's willing to put in the time to have these conversations. But more importantly, it's going to benefit you as a candidate because you're going to have more to talk about during interviews and really be able to consider, is this firm right for me? Is investment banking right for me? All these questions that relate to the industry that you won't be able to get answers for outside of actually talking to someone one-on-one. You finally got your interview. What next? Typically, investment banks are structured in a way where you have a resume drop and they cut based on GPA requirements, previous experiences, networking calls, and there's typically the first round interview. This might be over a phone call or Skype, it might be on campus. There's gonna be a final super day. I'm not gonna differentiate that. I'm gonna break this down into behavioral and technical. Technical is a check mark. You either know technical questions or you don't. Not something that differentiates you as a candidate. Walk me through a DCF. What is an LBO? What are the best ways to compare companies? These are questions that you should study inside and out. Now for what I consider to be the most important part of this video. Oh, let's go. I would actually call this part you and the firm. During the behavioral part of the interview, the bank interviewing you is really trying to figure out three things. One, why you? Two, why the bank? And three, and perhaps the most important and ties to both, why investment banking? You're gonna have to stand out amongst the 100 other candidates that they're choosing from. What makes you special? How have you performed in team settings? What was something hard that you dealt with and how did you deal with it? What is your email inbox looking like right now? This all has to do with you, and you should really figure yourself out. Why this bank? The answer for this question comes from your networking calls. A lot of the banks preach the same thing. They have great culture, they have great people, they have smart people, they get the most deals done, they have high revenue. But there are things that you'll pick up on when you network that makes this bank special, and you have to get that point across saying, I want to work for this bank because they do this the best. And lastly, why investment banking? I think this is by far the most important and almost in a way has to tie into both number one, why you, and number two, why this bank. The answer can't be because I want to make six figures at 22. There has to be something personal. The overarching buzzword that people describe is, what is your story? A blunt, slight pro tip. Let's say you just realized recently you want to do investment banking. Your 19, 20-year life did not all align itself to banking. I would not say make something up, but start thinking about what led you to this decision and your previous experiences in the past, and start aligning them, even if it means slightly forcing them into the story. As long as it makes sense, and as long as you can be passionate about it when delivering it during the interview, it should work out. One personal example that I could give that encompasses everything behavioral that I talked about is my sophomore year summer, I did not have a finance internship. This was because I was involved in a community service program / scholarship during college, which required me to dedicate a summer of service. I knew that I wanted to do banking. I also knew that having a summer banking internship after your junior year summer was almost crucial to getting a full-time offer. So I knew that the sophomore year summer was the last chance I had to finish this summer of service. So I actively pursued getting a summer of service opportunity back in my hometown. So I locked that down as an 8 to 5 working at an office supporting a nonprofit. But I also thought that doing that nonprofit alone wasn't going to be enough to get that banking internship later on. In addition to the 8 to 5 job that I had as a member of that nonprofit, I also worked at a restaurant at night from 6 to 10 or 7 to 11. I paired those two things by saying I could work an office job, I could work for a business, but I could also work in high stress, fast paced environments, and combine those two by saying I can work long hours. Granted, that wasn't it, and that wasn't the only part of my story, but this is to give you an illustration that not every aspect of your story has to be finance oriented. You could spin almost anything and everything to puzzle into investment banking. Just make sure you're cognizant and constantly thinking about how can this be a part of my story as soon as you realize investment banking is something you want to go into. I actually don't have like a monitor thing that's connected to the camera, so I have no idea what I look like or if my eyes are even looking at the lens or if this is focusing. Fun behind the scenes fact here. The next video might not be about finance.